With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown.
And I am Yolana Weeks.
Our top stories.
The Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force lauds the work of the National Intervention Team.
Despite repeated pleas for the public to exercise caution and consideration, accidents continue daily.
St. Kitts and Nevis's Energy Minister to preside over the meeting of the OECS Council of Energy Ministers as incoming chair.
St. Lucia MP Kenson Casimir slams baseless corruption allegations from UWP pages. Opposition MP in Guyana calls for first migration policy. Internationally, Israeli airstrike on southern Lebanon, at least 14 injured in attack. Now, the details.
Premier Mark Brantley has confirmed that the Nevis Island Administration, the NIA, will face a 15% shortfall in its budgetary allocations for the year.
In December last year, I had the pleasure of presenting the NIA budget for 2025. The budget provides a guide for the operations of the NIA. It is based on projections for revenue and expenditure. At each annual budget, I clearly outline that the extent to which we roll out our spending programs depends on our ability to access funding, especially for executing the items as outlined in our capital expenditure program. We always assure the public that we will not be reckless in our spending, and we will only seek to undertake projects if the funding is available or can be accessed at low cost in accordance with our debt management strategy. Where funding cannot be accessed at concessionary rates, we curtail our expenditure program and carry forward to the new fiscal period any projects which were not executed due to the lack of approved financing.
This reduction has led to the postponement of several projects due to funding constraints. Speaking at his Tuesday morning press conference, Premier Brantley acknowledged that budgetary shortfalls are not new to the NIA, referencing a similar situation in 2010 to provide context.
The budget estimates for 2010, for example, highlighted a budget deficit of $42.7 million and represented, therefore, unfunded expenditure for the then NRP-led Nevis Island administration. I use that only to show that it is a standard practice in budgeting that we set out what our forecasts and projections look like, but always with the caveat that it depends on our ability to raise the necessary financing to achieve them.
The Premier explained that the federal government's recent decision to implement a 6-month reduction in value-added tax is a contributing factor to the shortfall. The VAT rate was reduced by 4% from 17% to 13%, as announced by Prime Minister Dr. Terence Drew. This change came after the NIA had already presented its annual budget, leaving the local government to grapple with the unexpected financial impact.
For the first half of fiscal year 2025, we will see a reduction in the value-added tax from 17% to 13%, as laid out in the federal budget read by Prime Minister Drew. This will impact the revenue collected at the Customs and Inland Revenue Departments in Nevis, the two highest revenue collection departments of the NIA. This, along with other factors, have created a shortfall in the identified funding of the budget of between 15% to 20%. This is neither unusual nor alarming. Let me repeat. This is neither unusual nor alarming.
Deputy Commissioner of Police Mr. Cromwell Henry said the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force ensures to build bonds with children from a young age to help steer them away from delinquent behaviors. The Children's Outreach is a collaborative effort between the police and the community to target the prevention of crime before it occurs.
Apart from working in the schools, in sort of creating a bond between the police and the young people, because we prefer them to make a bond with the police than to make bonds with the criminal, because children are looking out to look up to someone, and we want to give them that opportunity to look up to the police, to create that bond with the police, as opposed to creating the bond with criminal elements.
Henry highlighted the work of the National Intervention Team under the leadership of Sergeant Charmaine O'Dane, which has been meeting children within the school setting, at community centers, and during the force's youth football program, providing mentorship and discipline.
But in addition to working with the schools, she also works along with our security forces football team in their youth program. They have a youth football program, and she works along with that team as well to mold the children who are into that football program. So when they come to the sessions, they not only hear about football, they hear about other life skills, other soft skills that could propel them, turn them, steer them in the right direction. So she's working along with the management of the security forces football team and their youth football program. We had a summer camp gone just last August. We had over 300 children on that camp. Following that camp, Sergeant Odin and a few of her officers from her team, they traveled to England to look at the youth programs in England to see what lessons could be learned from those programs that she could bring back here to introduce. So she's expanding beyond just going in the schools. She's going into the communities.
The National Intervention Team meets with children ages 5 to 17 on Mondays at the McKnight Community Centre, Tuesdays at the St. Peter's Community Centre, and Thursdays at the Newtown Community Centre and the Joshua Obadiah Williams Primary School in St. Kitts from 4:30 to 6 p.m. The National Intervention Team Youth Club also meets in Nevis on Wednesdays at the St. Thomas's Primary School between 4:30 to 6 p.m. Parents and guardians can register or seek further information by calling 1-869-665-5785.
Despite repeated pleas for the public to exercise caution and consideration on the roadways, accidents continue to occur daily. On Monday's edition of Traffic Talk, Sergeant Sophia Henry and Traffic Officer Trimmingham shared valuable tips to help drivers navigate the roadways more safely. Sergeant Henry emphasized that exercising courtesy on the roadway can significantly reduce the risk of accidents. She encouraged drivers to be mindful of others, including pedestrians and cyclists, and to avoid aggressive driving behaviors.
Our roads aren't safe for several reasons. Distracted drivers, road rage, yes, poor roadways, and so much more. These are our best tips on how to be a courteous driver, whether you're on the highway or a residential area. Courteous driving means giving other drivers space to change lane, not to cutting them off and signaling your turn and lane changes. So, as I said, being a courteous driver can make it so much easier for other drivers on the road.
Officer Trimmingham, meanwhile, highlighted several practical tips drivers should consider, including obeying speed limits, using indicators when turning, and maintaining a safe following distance.
To other motorists, it is very vital to signal your intention of stopping, passing, turning left or right, or slowing down to warn other drivers. Give way to vehicles who would like to overtake your path, although that you have the right of way. Right? That's basically saying, although you have the right of way, right? If you notice that somebody is overtaking or trying to pass you, you should give that driver who's passing enough space in which they can pass you safely. Right? The Traffic Act also speaks about overtaking and the do's and don'ts when it comes to overtaking. Check your distance with other vehicles and avoid tailgating. Right? And this has been a trend lately in motorists these days, that they drive in behind other motor vehicles and they right up behind and the tail.
He also stressed the importance of staying alert at all times, especially in areas where children may be playing near the roadway.
Always show courtesy to pedestrians. When it comes to pedestrians, especially children, children often forget the dangers of traffic when playing on sidewalks. Right? They often run into the street without looking or without thinking. Right? So as drivers, we should always be alert, especially when we travel through school zones and so on. Right? So even if you see a lot of children on the road today, it's not cause for you to drive recklessly.
With accidents occurring at an alarming rate, law enforcement is urging motorists to adopt safer driving habits to help protect all road users.
Honorable Conris Maynard, Minister of Energy for St. Kitts and Nevis, will preside over the meeting of the OECS Council of Energy Ministers on February 4 to 5 at the St. Kitts Marriott Hotel. Energy ministers from across the region will be discussing a landmark decade-long strategy to achieve a 30% renewable energy target by 2030 and 50% by 2035. The main initiatives of discussion would include Caribbean Energy Interconnection, OECS photovoltaic hosting capacity study, and geothermal energy development. The Caribbean Development Bank will lead the presentation on energy interconnection and guide the region's approach to energy security, collaboration, and sustainability. The ministers are also expected to hone in on realistic science-based PV limits for each country's power grid and will also shed light on the Eastern Caribbean Solar Challenge and the progress made thus far. The Council of Ministers will also explore the potential of geothermal energy beyond electricity generation. Nevis, like a few other territories, has possessed substantial estimated geothermal electricity potential, with plans to export to St. Kitts and other neighboring territories such as Anguilla. The meeting would be held under the theme Sustainable Energy, Creating Opportunities for Reinventing the Economy of the OECS. The meeting comes at a time when the world over, especially the Caribbean, faces some of the highest electricity prices and the effects of the climate crisis due to carbon emissions. In alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the OECS vision of a decade of action on sustainable energy, the energy ministers continue to work on a plan for a transition to more sustainable energy sources.
In regional news, St. Lucia MP Kenson Casimir slams baseless corruption allegations from UWP pages, DBS St. Lucia reports.
Parliamentary Representative Kenson Casimir has criticized the United Workers' Party, the UWP, for what he describes as personal attacks against him and his family. Speaking at Monday's pre-cabinet presser, Casimir expressed deep concern over the nature of social media posts made by UWP supporters. He specifically addressed a recent post from a UWP-affiliated Facebook page, which shared a copy of a property deed for a piece of land which Casimir purchased last year in Masset Grosley. The post seemed to indicate that some form of corruption was involved in the purchase of the lands, valued above $250,000.
I, as a St. Lucian, I feel that is within my purview that if I have a particular amount of savings or a particular amount of connection with banking institutions, I think it's within my right for all of us young people, whether you're a politician or whether you're not a politician, whether you're a banker, whether you're a physician, a doctor, a lawyer, I think that every single one of us here can go to a banking institution and get a loan. The bank will decide whether or not you qualify for a loan. So I will apologize when I make a mistake, and I've shown that before. But in me going to a bank, applying for a loan and being granted a loan, for UWP to purchase a piece of St. Lucia, for UWP to take that document and to post it on social media as if something untoward is happening, I think it's disgraceful, and it's an element that can discourage young people from getting involved in politics. I refuse to believe that if I spend the next 20 years of my life providing service to St. Lucia, that disqualifies me from going to a lending institution and borrowing money to purchase a piece of property.
Casimir has condemned the social media post, noting that such allegations are not only unfounded but also serve to undermine the integrity of political discourse in the country.
I have explored all my options, and I continue to explore all my options in terms of how I deal with this going forward, because my personal information has been published in the public sphere. And I think genuinely what I have going for me is my connection with my community, my constituency, and individuals who know me, who have said to me and comforted me when I go on the ground that this is just unsavory and this is desperate. And for me, my responsibility is my constituency and young people. I will for sure explore all my options. But there's just so much work to be done.
The Grosley MP argues that politicians have a responsibility to set a positive example for their constituents, emphasizing the divisive nature of current political rhetoric and its potential impact on the island's youth.
And no, I do not have a goat well.
Over the years, members of civil society as well as politicians from both sides have called for a code of ethics for politicians. Casmer believes that the SLP would welcome such a code, but he also expressed uncertainty about whether the opposition would be as receptive.
I think that the St. Lucia Labour Party, even when they were in opposition, they were never that nasty. They were never that personal. They were never that vindictive. I mean, can you imagine the United Workers' Party have the temerity, the unmitigated guts to attack a Chief Justice? Somebody who's been upstanding in St. Lucia, provided stellar representation in Grosley for 2 terms, Justice Larry Michel. It means that these guys have no boundary. We can have a code of ethics. I believe my party would adhere to everything because we can speak on the substance of our representation in this country and the development we've had in 3.5 years, while the other party, we will continue to go high and they will definitely continue to go low because there's no other place for them to go, period.
For the DBS News World, Zane Romulus reported.
Opposition MP in Guyana calls for first migration policy. Guyana News Source has the details.
Opposition Member of Parliament and Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister Amanza Walton Desir hammered the government's handling of the migrant crisis facing Guyana, as more Venezuelan migrants continue to pour in across the borders. Making her contribution to the national budget debates, MP Walton Desir said it is clear that there is no regulation of migration here in Guyana. She said the migration of Venezuelans here must not be viewed in isolation with the ongoing border controversy and Venezuela's ongoing claims of Guyana's territory. The opposition member of parliament, who is also an attorney, said the government appears to have lost control over the issue. She said the silence of the ministers of Foreign Affairs and Home Affairs on the migrant crisis during their budget debate contributions is testament that nothing is really being done and the government is not taking the matter seriously.
Mr. Speaker, it is obvious, painfully obvious, from the fact that the members had nothing to offer us as to how they will manage migration into this country, that they have lost control of the migrant situation, and they have put our country, Mr. Speaker, resultingly in clear and present danger, jeopardizing our security and our sovereignty.
Walton Desir said there must be a migration policy that will ensure not only orderly migration, but the safety and security of Guyanese. She said under the current situation, Guyana and Guyanese are at risk.
Mr. Speaker, to mitigate these risks and to protect the integrity of our nation, we must immediately, Mr. Speaker, immediately establish a mandatory migrant registration system. Mr. Speaker, this system will allow us to effectively monitor the movement of individuals entering our country, to track the duration of their stay, and to ensure that migration, particularly across our porous borders, Mr. Speaker, across our porous borders, that they are monitored, Mr. Speaker, and to ensure that the migration is done in a more orderly fashion.
The opposition MP also called out the government for being weak in its vetting process for migrants. She said the Guyana government must be mindful of the growing number of Venezuelan migrants coming over to Guyana with no policy in place.
Mr. Speaker, and we as a nation have to be mindful that this paradigm is not being used against us to our detriment by the deliberate injection of population into our Essequibo. Mr. Speaker, we must place emphasis on enhancing our military presence along the border, much like the coalition did with Operation Armadillo. Instead of having our military men and women in blue t-shirts cleaning the drains in the city.
Ms. Walton-Desir said the migration profile which the Foreign Affairs Minister has embarked on since 2021 is still not in operation. In her view, the government is not taking the issue seriously, particularly in view that criminal elements could be among those coming into Guyana unchecked. It is estimated that there are now more than 40,000 Venezuelan migrants spread across Guyana.
We now bring you these international reports.
From southern Lebanon, where at least 14 people have been injured in 2 Israeli air raids. This is the biggest Israeli airstrike in the heart of southern Lebanon since the ceasefire with Hezbollah took hold. Israeli army radio confirmed that the army launched an air raid on the area where a blaze has broken out. Zaina Hodder is on the phone for us in Beirut. And Zaina, what more do we know at this point?
Well, the timing of these airstrikes come amid heightened tensions in southern Lebanon and growing concerns about the continued stability of that ceasefire agreement, which came into force in late November. Since then, there have been a few Israeli strikes and drone strikes, but tonight's attack in the southern city of Nabati, they are being described as the biggest strikes yet. The Lebanese Health Ministry is reporting that at least 14 people were injured in the first strike. We still do not know who or what the target was. The Israeli military has been targeting Hezbollah and its assets in recent months. On Sunday, the Israeli military was supposed to have withdrawn from Lebanese territory in line with a 60-day deadline as stipulated in that ceasefire agreement. They did not. They did leave some areas in the western and central sectors, but they still remain in the sector east of southern Lebanon. The Israeli military saying that there is still a need for their forces to remain in Lebanon because Hezbollah remains a threat and the Lebanese army has not fully deployed along the border as it is supposed to under the deal. Now, army commanders are saying that the reason why they haven't been able to deploy is because of the presence of Israeli troops. So there is tension on the ground. In the past 48 hours, more than 20 Lebanese have been killed by Israeli fire. Residents of those villages along the border want to go home, and they challenged Israeli troops by trying to advance towards their villages. Israeli troops opened fire, and dozens of others were injured. So there are growing concerns about whether or not this ceasefire agreement, which has been largely holding, fragile nevertheless, but largely holding, there are concerns about its continued stability.
Do we know at this stage, Zaina, what might have triggered this raid? And tell us a little bit more about the fragility of the ceasefire and what the implications may be.
Well, there are still reports coming in. We have not been able to confirm them as of yet. Reports that this could be a targeted assassination. What we saw, Hezbollah and Israel were involved in a low-intensity conflict for nearly a year, triggered by Israel's war on Gaza. But in September, Israel launched a major military offensive against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, eastern Lebanon, and Beirut southern suburbs, targeting areas where the group holds sway, where its supporters live. What they have been targeting are either Hezbollah weapons depots, commanders. They've killed the top leadership of Hezbollah. There are reports that tonight's strike in Nabati could have been an assassination attempt against a Hezbollah member involved in financing the group. But again, this has not been confirmed. But these have been the targets. Israel's strategy has been to weaken Hezbollah militarily. And there is no doubt the group has taken losses. It has been weakened. The group itself has acknowledged this. But it is also saying that it is slowly regaining its strength. But Hezbollah, at this point in time, has been trying to project its influence, to say that it may have been severely weakened, but it is still a force to be reckoned with. We've seen its supporters reach the border regions carrying Hezbollah flags, and Israeli media describe these actions as provocations on the part of Hezbollah, and they criticize both the political and military leadership in Israel that the ceasefire agreement did not bring, safety and security to the border region because Hezbollah has returned. And it is rhetoric like this which is causing concern in Lebanon that we may see the violence stepping up in the days to come.
According to Hamas officials, more than 300,000 displaced Palestinians moved from southern parts of Gaza, where they had been seeking shelter from the war, back to northern Gaza. The movement of people is continuing today. Many people travelling by foot, carrying their possessions with them. The movement back to the north was agreed under the ceasefire deal. Many people say they're returning to find their homes have been destroyed or looted. Lucy Williamson reports.
For 15 months, home was a place Gazans carried inside them. Whatever else they carried, whatever they lost. Today, the road home was reopened, reclaimed, remembered. The war made nomads of Gaza's people. This journey is the one they'd waited to make. Razak Al-Qassas was walking slowly, his granddaughter's pace. Family survivors, old and young.
I collected her father in pieces from Khan Yunis. Thank God, I'm crying from happiness. I don't want anything except to enter my land, even if I only eat mud.
More than 500,000 people were displaced from northern Gaza during the war. Some of those returning now, fearful of what home will look like. Others who don't remember it at all.
My feeling is indescribable. What am I expecting? We will see the same destruction that we have seen here. There is no alternative. We're going from emptiness to emptiness.
The home many return to. Satellite images suggest 3/4 of Gaza City's buildings have been damaged or destroyed. Houses burnt, businesses looted. Relatives still buried in the rubble. Hamas officials have called for 130,000 emergency tents to shelter people returning to the north. Gaza's displaced, still homeless, even after coming home. The road outside, once divided by military checkpoints, now a place of reunions. Israeli soldiers withdrawn, replaced by familiar faces. The impact of this truce is taking hold, but talks on extending it into a permanent ceasefire, talks on Gaza's future, haven't yet begun. For Gazans, the road back home is open, but the path ahead is unclear.
Lucy Williamson. Our correspondent Nick Beak is following developments from Jerusalem and told us about the journeys many Palestinians are making as they return to their homes in Gaza.
We're getting some really vivid accounts of people who've made the trip from the south back to the north. They set off, they say, with great expectations and hope that finally they're able to go back to their neighbourhoods after 15 months of war. But so many people are saying that actually when they turn the corner, they get back to the streets that they knew. There's nothing remaining of their houses. In some cases, maybe just one room is still standing, a fragment of the house that they knew. Lots of people are saying this, and also the lucky ones are very much in the minority, those whose homes have been spared. At the same time, charities are saying that at the moment they've got an opportunity to bring in more aid. They've really boosted the amount of medicine and other supplies getting in, but there's a really big problem. They talk about the electricity and the water being these essentials that simply aren't there at the moment.
What help is there then available to them in terms of aid getting through?
Well, this is the big question, because as part of this ceasefire deal, which is for now holding, although it's fragile by nature, at least 600 trucks are supposed to be coming into Gaza every day. A week ago, just in the hours after the ceasefire came into effect, there was something like 900 trucks every day. That had fallen to around 300 last Friday. Not immediately sure why that is, but charities say they are bringing things in. I mean, emergency shelter is really important, and so we're talking about tents and in some cases caravans. These are seen as essential because people may well have gone home, if you put it like that, but their houses aren't there, and so shelter is really, really important for people in the days and weeks to come.
And Nick, from the Israeli side, the hostage releases, some of the worst possible news coming for some families who've been waiting so long.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've got 5 weeks left of this initial phase of the ceasefire deal. There are 26 hostages who are due to be released in that time, and the Israeli government saying yesterday that Hamas had given them information that 8 of those 26 hostages had died. It's worth pointing out that that figure had been reported quite widely in the Israeli media over the past couple of weeks or so, but clearly for those families that is confirmation, as best as they can have it at this moment, information coming from Hamas that their loved ones have been killed. As you were saying, the hostage exchange continues, and what we'll see is on Thursday 3 more hostages being released, and then another 3 at the weekend. And of course at the same time, lots of Palestinian prisoners currently in Israeli detention in Israeli prisons, they will be released as well. So this quite complicated system, which of course took months to be arrived at, continues, and for now, despite this hiccup we saw at the weekend, it is progressing, Martin.
Heavy gunfire echoed the streets of eastern Congo's biggest city on Tuesday. Rwandan-backed rebels entered Goma the day before, a dramatic escalation of a 3-decade conflict that has also triggered protests in the capital Kinshasa. But the rebels, led by the M23 militia, are facing pockets of resistance from the army and its backers. Social media video has been verified using previous footage of the area and satellite imagery, though the identities or affiliations of the troops were not confirmed. The violence has left, the United Nations said, many dead bodies scattered in the streets.
The humanitarian situation in and around Goma remains extremely worrying.
Jens Lerck, spokesperson for the UN's humanitarian office, said hospitals were overwhelmed.
We have reports of rapes committed by fighters, looting of property, including of a humanitarian warehouse, and humanitarian and health facilities being hit.
This violence in eastern Congo is rooted in the Rwandan genocide and the control of natural resources. The UN and global powers fear an escalation into a regional war like those in 1996 to 1997 and 1998 to 2003. Conflicts that killed millions, mostly through hunger and disease. In the latest diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis, South Africa said its president Cyril Ramaphosa and his Rwandan counterpart Paul Kagame had agreed in a phone call on the need for a ceasefire. On Tuesday, the insecurity fueled anger in the Congolese capital over perceived foreign interference. Police clashed with protesters who attacked diplomatic buildings in Kinshasa, including a UN compound and the French and US embassies. The Rwandan embassy, its gates set ablaze. Rwanda has long denied backing M23, though UN experts have concluded that Kigali has provided significant manpower and firepower. The Congolese government and the head of UN peacekeeping have said Rwandan troops were present in Goma, backing up their M23 allies. Rwanda has said it was adopting a defensive posture because of the threat posed to it by Congolese militias.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were:
the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force lauds the work of the National Intervention Team.
Despite repeated pleas for the public to exercise caution and consideration, accidents continue daily.
St. Kitts and Nevis' energy minister to preside over the meeting of the OECS Council of Energy Ministers as incoming chair.
St. Lucia MP Kenson Casimir slams baseless corruption allegations from UWP pages. Opposition MP in Guyana calls for first migration policy. Internationally, Israeli airstrike on southern Lebanon, at least 14 injured in attack. Thank you for listening.